Welcome to This Explainer. If you're a teacher or a school leader currently gearing up to rate your school's program standards and practices, specifically tackling the culture standard, you are in exactly the right spot. We're going to break down exactly what the IB expects, how to look objectively at your school's practices, and most importantly, how to accurately rate them for your self-study. Let's make this administrative task as clear, painless, and effective as possible.
Here's a quick roadmap for our time today. We'll start by defining school culture, then explore the 6 key pillars, look at the spirit of the realm, gaze into the magic mirror of self-assessment, trace the path to mastery, and finally, tackle the final assessment.
Section 1. Defining school culture and its foundational structures.
First things first, let's look at the actual blueprint. Because before we can assess our culture, we really have to see where it fits into the grand scheme of an IB World school. When you look at the framework, notice how culture acts as a vital, foundational block right there on the bottom left. It sits right alongside environment. Together, those two hold up purpose. And right in the dead center, entirely supported by culture, environment, and purpose, is your ultimate goal, learning. The whole structure is wrapped in the IB philosophy and your school's unique context. What this tells us is that you simply cannot separate your school's learning outcomes from the culture that surrounds them. They're entirely interdependent.
So before you can honestly rate your culture for the self-study, you gotta ask, what does the IB actually consider culture to be? Well, the official documentation defines school culture as the written and unwritten rules that dictate how a school functions. It's not just a bunch of policies sitting in a binder on a shelf somewhere. It is a living, breathing environment. It encompasses personal and collective well-being, how effectively you utilize physical and human resources, and the extent to which your school actually acknowledges and celebrates diversity. Think of it as the rich soil where the IB philosophy can truly thrive.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 6 magical pillars, or your standard 301 policies.
All right, here's the real meat of what you'll be assessing in your self-study. A positive school culture is forged through the successful development, implementation, communication, and review of 6 very specific policies under Standard 0301. First up is your access policy, which is all about securing an IB education for the broadest possible range of students. Second is inclusion, creating an environment that genuinely supports all students to reach their full potential. Third is academic integrity, because you have to forge a culture of ethical practice. Fourth is language, which fosters intercultural understanding through multilingualism. Fifth is assessment, creating a culture built on continuous learning and growth. And finally, the 6th pillar is ensuring all these IB-mandated policies are cohesively integrated, basically ensuring they reflect the IB philosophy in everything you do, from your physical spaces all the way to high-level decision-making. When you're rating your school, these are the 6 pillars you're looking closely at.
Section 3, the spirit of the realm, focusing on the IB learner profile.
Because, a true community isn't just made up of policies. It's made of the people living those policies. And that brings us to the IB learner profile. These 10 attributes, being inquirers, knowledgeable, thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk-takers, balanced, and reflective, these are the absolute heartbeat of your culture. In fact, Standard 0301 specifically mandates that your school must intentionally consider the IB learner profile in all of its policies. It's designed to foster international mindedness and help individuals become truly responsible members of our global community.
Section 4, the magic mirror, which is all about the self-assessment process itself.
Now that we've mapped out what makes up our culture, the framework, those 6 policies and the learner profile, we hit the tricky part. How do we actually measure something as vast and intangible as our school's vibe or culture? How do you put a hard rating on unwritten rules and collective well-being? Well, the good news is the IB provides a very structured way to do exactly this. The IB documentation stresses that this self-assessment shouldn't just be a bureaucratic checklist for the leadership team. It is meant to be a profound, communal reflection involving all community members. Your task here is to identify exactly where the school currently excels, where it has actually shown growth over the review period, and honestly, what needs some extra attention. You're basically verifying that the fundamental requirements for each practice are firmly in place before you determine how deeply they are embedded into the daily life of your school.
Section 5, the path to mastery, where we talk about assessing development.
When you're looking at your progress, this rubric right here is going to be your best friend. It breaks down the shift from a policy that's just starting to take root versus one that's systematically developed across the board. Notice how it progresses across 3 key areas: implementation, understanding, and integration. So, if a practice is labeled developing, that means it's only partially implemented, and maybe only some folks understand or integrate it. Developed means it's generally implemented and most people get it. But to hit that top tier of highly developed, the practice has to be systematically developed, effectively implemented, fully understood by everyone it impacts, and baked into all relevant school processes. It's a high bar.
But listen, here is a crucial piece of advice. Don't get too rigid with these descriptors. The IB completely acknowledges that in most IB World schools, programs develop unevenly. You might have an academic integrity policy that is absolutely highly developed, but maybe your inclusion policy is currently sitting at developing. And you know what? That is completely normal. You should use a best fit approach to honestly capture the natural, uneven growth of your unique journey. Remember, the goal here is an accurate reflection of reality, not the illusion of perfection.
Section 6, the final assessment. Bringing it all together to rate the standard.
Okay, we've reached the finish line of the evaluation. After you've gone through and honestly rated every single individual practice within the culture standard, you have to zoom out. You look at the big picture and rate the entire standard across these 4 aspirational tiers. You'll decide if the standard overall requires development, offers opportunity for further development, shows development beyond requirements, or shows notable development. And how do you snag that top rating? The documentation makes it clear. You aim for notable development only when most or all of your individual practices within the standard have been rated as highly developed. Like I said, it's a high bar, but it's an incredibly rewarding one to aim for.
As you're sifting through all this paperwork, it is so easy to get tunnel vision on the checkboxes of the self-study. But we've got to remember the ultimate goal here. Rating these rubrics isn't just about compliance. The standard of culture is deeply tied to the shared purpose of the IB, which is to develop inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people who help to create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. The culture you foster is the actual vehicle for that mission.
So as you head back to your teams to dive into your self-study and collaborate with your fellow educators, I want you to ask yourself, how will the culture you're building today and the policies you're refining through this evaluation shape the global citizens of tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Good luck with your self-study and happy evaluating.